Alright guys, this is the idea Cochise of Cochise Rome, weighing in the weight classes, episode 2, part B. Usually Strikeforce puts on many exciting events. Last Saturday's Fedor versus Dan Henderson was not one of them. Let's get into a couple of my notes, shall we? Alright, first off, I'm going to start off with the Sabatini versus Scott Smith. It depends on how you look at this. Is Scott Smith, does he possess a good chin, or does Sabatini is just a weak striker with no power? Scott Smith just got cornered into the back of the cage over and over again throughout the whole fight. It was pretty uneventful and quite boring. Let's move on to Tim Kennedy versus Robbie Lawler. And the announcers stated that the Jacare fight with Tim Kennedy was controversial. I don't think that fight was controversial to anyone outside of Tim Kennedy. You know, Jacare stood up with him the whole time, avoided many of his power shots, didn't go to the ground, which is really Jacare's strong point. I think Jacare was more trying to showcase his striking ability, his improved striking ability, rather than be scared of Tim Kennedy's takedown. Robbie Lawler, on the other hand, is one of those times a fighter has too much movement, like so much movement they can't really set up a decent combination with any sort of power. He looked very crisp, especially towards the end of the fight, towards the third round. The announcers would once again talk about how like this is going to set up the #1 contenders for the middleweight championship. And there's nothing about this fight, either from Robbie Lawler or Tim Kennedy, that was about being a #1 contender outside the fact that Strikeforce doesn't have that many middleweights. Robbie Lawler really hesitated that third round when he was the crisper fighter. And logically, from a person who doesn't train's perspective, you would think that, oh yeah, you know, if you look crisper in the third round, you're just going to take it. Actually, from what I've seen from a lot of people in the gym, is that when some, you know, just when we're in regular sparring, when someone's down at points that, you know, they actually conserve a little bit. I don't know why. Maybe it's a psychological thing, but that's what Robbie Lawler was doing. He just couldn't pull the trigger. Okay, another boring fight overall. Now, this is where things start to piss me off, is the Conan versus Tate Women's Championship match. Okay, the first round starts off with 2 minutes against the cage, and the ref's not doing anything. With the positioning, Tate got good position, didn't do nothing from the top. Round 2, we get another 1 minute and 45 seconds straight off the bat of going against the cage. This leads to another sub attempt by Conan, and for 3.5 minutes, Tate was in danger of a submission. The round ends. Round 3, Tate looks a little tired, you know, from defending off the submissions from the second round. This is the first round not to start against the cage. It ends up with a takedown in probably after 1 minute of fighting, and then for 2 minutes of doing nothing, they finally stand them up. Honestly, the referee should have been way more active in this fight because this shit was fucking boring. Okay, here we go. Round 4. The striking advantage, to me, once again goes to Conan. Guillotine sub attempt, gets taken down. Tate wins the fight via arm triangle submission. But to me, Conan won the war. I mean, from submission attempts to just effective striking, it was Conan. And then at the very end, Tate got the submission victory. So she won the fight, but she didn't look like no champion to me. I'm glad that she didn't succumb to the pressure and whatnot from losing a bunch of rounds or being very boring for fucking 4.5 rounds. But at the same time, she didn't look all that hot to me. Usually women's fighting is very exciting. It's a lot of free-for-all striking, you know, submission attempts, you know, coming as soon as there's an opening. This time around, fuck, we've got 3 fucking boring fights. Now, before I get to the main event, I want to talk about this issue with Bobby Green and Jay-Z Cavalcante. There's a split decision win, and this is another fight that I thought. This is a fight that I thought Bobby Green was going to take it, and maybe he should have. There's a couple of articles on the internet talking about how Bobby Green was submitted in the second round. However, if on TV and to a lot of the spectators, it may look like he tapped, but with the referee right in front of you, talking to you, and you're signaling or communicating back, that doesn't constitute a tap to me, especially in the chokehold. Jay-Z won by split decision, and to be honest with you, I'm not that angry, just because Jay-Z, ever since coming to Strikeforce, has had to deal with a lot of bullshit. The bullshit fight with Josh Thompson, the weird no contest with Justin Wilcox with the accidental eye poke. So maybe Cavalcante deserves it, and it keeps his name relevant, and it elevates Bobby Green. So in a way, they're both winners. Otherwise, if Bobby Green got submitted, then that means Jay-Z submitted a nobody. If Cavalcante lost, then Cavalcante's done, and Jay-Z and Bobby Green may just been beaten a has-been. So this way, everyone wins. Okay, now let's get to oh my God, I forgot about Tyron Woodley versus Paul Daley. Exactly how I called it. Took him to the ground, did a whole lot of nothing, and won the fight. Now let's get into the main event. The main event, Fedor Emelianenko versus Dan Hollywood Henderson. His pride nickname. I thought Fedor was going to submit Hendo in the second round. The first round was very exciting. I mean, very exciting right off the bat. And there's been a ton of articles on, MMAcore.com, MMA Linker, Sherdog.com, talking about the stoppage, because it was a very questionable stoppage. And a lot of people have been writing posts about the Czech Congo Pat Barry fight in UFC a couple of events ago, where Pat Barry had Czech Congo just running around rock, and then suddenly Czech Congo knocks him out. I think that's too far. Plus, that's a different organization technically. Just look at Paul Daley versus Nick Diaz. Paul Daley face plants Nick Diaz, but they keep the fight going. And it looked more impressive because they were both standing at the time, as to when Hendo landed the right hand upper hook and floored Fedor. Fedor was already on his knees, and there's a lot of people making speculation like, oh well, Hendo would just kept hitting him. Well, from what I remember, Fedor knocked down / tripped Hendo into the cage at the beginning of this chain of events, pounding him. Hendo goes for a sweep, gets to his back, and then he hits the uppercut. So what stops Fedor from doing the same fucking thing? Scott Croker called this the most important, exciting fight in Strikeforce history. I don't know about that. They've had a lot of exciting fights. This is probably the most important fight that they had, especially with Alistair Overeem being cut from Strikeforce. So now they don't have a heavyweight champion. Everything they had going for it is fucking stopped. Right now, the heavyweight Grand Prix is damn near worthless unless Sergey Karatana wins both the fight he has with Alistair Overeem in October, and he wins the Grand Prix. So once again, Strikeforce is dependent on a Russian to take care of everything. If you have both Bigfoot and Josh Barnett, who really not that long ago got caught with steroids, and then you have another up-and-coming kid, I forget, Comer. So if he wins it, it just comes out of nowhere. If Josh Barnett or Bigfoot Silva, then you have a steroid-injected champion. Karatana is the only guy who is not pissed hot and is considered, I think, a little bit more legit. However, he has a big hole in his ground game that someone like Josh Barnett would definitely exploit. So also with Strikeforce right now, when this going back to how the Fedor and Henderson was the most exciting fight, I said it was the most important fight because it's kind of like the ending chapter of the Fedor-Emelianenko thing. I mean, Strikeforce's big uprise was because they signed Fedor, and then he wins one fight, loses 3, and pretty much this is the closing chapter for him. I think he's going to fight again. I mean, they've all been exciting fights. There's been fights I want to see, and the live crowd was very, very, very into Fedor. However, the buy rates, I'm not too sure about. Like I said, a lot of people didn't know this fight was taking place. My hits for weighing on the weight classes, episode 2, part A, was the lowest that of any of my YouTube videos were. And this is including the Dream event from episode 1. Like, I had at least like 35 hits when it came to Dream. So, I mean, if Dream is beating out Strikeforce and YouTube hits, I don't know what the fuck's going on. They also have to watch out with Nick Diaz fight GSP. If GSP fights his standardized Jackson play it safe style, GSP lost the fight. And I mean, not GSP, Nick Diaz lost his fight. And then you can walk around with two non-champions. Really 3, because Jacare was a substitute champion after winning it vacant title style when Jake Shields left the company. So you're walking around with like 3 non-titleists, and that's kind of a big problem. So the only real champion you have is Gilbert Melendez. Other than that, you know, I'm kind of happy that I wasn't perfect like I was with the Dream card, because it gave me a lot more interesting things to say. Hopefully Strikeforce can stay around, because they do put exciting events on. But with all the stuff going on, Overeem leaving, Fedor losing 3 times straight, the Grand Prix is not what it once was. This boring ass women's championship fight and a boring ass undercard. They have really very little momentum right now. Hopefully at their next event they can change everything. Okay guys, stay tuned, and maybe about one day or hopefully later tonight I will have Weighing on the Weight Classes episode 3 up and running. Okay guys, take care.